when they say that the 20th century produced more martyrs than all the other centuries, they're not just simply wishful thinking. It's probably very, very true. And we're thinking, for instance, we talk about the North American martyrs now because in context of our pilgrimage, to the shrine at Auriesville of the North American martyrs, we have, about a dozen people in upstate New York who were put to death. We also have in Canada a parallel shrine where some of those, Jean de Brebeuf, and his companions were also put to death, I think this time by the Hurons rather than by the Iroquois. But when you look back on things, you realize that in a certain sense, in a certain true sense, the 20th century really surpasses the others. Communism probably created more martyrs. Communism and not only Marxism, but fascism and Nazism, and probably created more Christian and Catholic martyrs than so many other centuries put together. Just as we had the Holocaust of the Jews, we had really the martyrdom of Catholic priests and nuns and brothers and so forth. Amazing. For instance, at the concentration camp in Dachau during the Nazi times, which is near the city of Munich, approximately 4,000 Polish priests were interned there during the war. Very, very few of them survived the experience. All right, by the time the war was over, perhaps half the clergy of Poland had disappeared. When I say disappeared, I mean were arrested under surreptitious circumstances, falsely charged, and quickly put to death. And sometimes their bodies were never recovered. So we were aware of all these things, but we still honor the martyrs that were the proto-martyrs, the first martyrs, because they sort of set the tone for so much that comes afterwards. I want to think also of some of the different groups. Now in Yugoslavia, there were many, many martyrs among the clergy and among the lay people too. Probably during the World War II and the beginning of the communist era, perhaps as many as 600 priests were put to death. There's a famous episode that occurred about a year after the war when the Franciscan headquarters in Bosnia was taken over, and the fanatical communists who were running the group, the partisans at that time, demanded that the clergy take off their habits, throw them on the ground, throw the crucifixes on, stomp on them, and swear that they would never say a prayer to Jesus ever again in their lives, and that they believed in atheism. So you see, to a man, those Franciscan priests refused to do that, and over a period of about 2 weeks, 46 Franciscan brothers or friars were put to death. All right, that sealed the wonderful reputation that the Franciscan friars had for the Franciscans, that the ordinary people of Bosnia had for the Franciscans, you see, because for 4 centuries the place was run really by the Turks. It was part of the Ottoman Empire, and of course the Ottomans, the Turks at that time, were Muslim, all right, and they favored the Muslims and naturally persecuted the Christians. So what happened was that most of the regular secular clergy, very exposed, living near the church, living in a rectory and so forth, they were driven out, and many of them fled. But the upshot of it was there were no sacraments, no masses being said, and no priests around. What happened? Well, the Franciscans did it differently. When the persecutors came, they took off their habits and proposed as wandering farm laborers who were walking around looking for work or just keeping themselves well hidden. And the word was uncle. That was the little signal. Uncle is here. That meant that a friar had shown up. There would be a meeting of anybody who wanted to hear a mass or have a baptism of a new baby or solemnize their wedding vows, would gather around midnight or after midnight, well into the night, at a certain barn that would be known to the people who could be trusted. The friar would come in, he would say mass, he would catch everybody at prayers for the deceased, baptize the new baby, solemnize any marriage vows that needed, give extreme unction or the rites of the sick to anyone who could be there. And before any informant or whatnot could get back to where the Turks were, he'd be gone. He'd be gone well before dawn. All right, but he kept the church alive for 400 years that way. Now, many of those men were caught and put to death during that time, but many survived and served for years on the underground, okay? And that sealed again the affection that the Bosnian people have for the Franciscan order. And when the Austrians and then later on others wanted to restore a more native hierarchy, it was a little difficult because there was tension between the new priests coming who spoke German and so forth, and wanted to make the Bosnia part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Franciscans were there for 400 years already. So you see, some tension there, but nonetheless, it was based on the wonderful affection and trust that the people had for the Franciscans. Now, the Jesuits were very, very powerful and very strong at that time also, and that's what we were having experience of here at the North American Martyrs. The priests and the brothers and so forth were of the Jesuit order founded by St. Ignatius about 100 years prior to that. All right, and these zealous men came to the New World, to Canada, in this instance, because France was Catholic, brought Catholic missionaries over. The English colonies, the Pilgrims and so forth, were on the coast, but the area where there was some contest as to who would be the foreign power, upstate New York and parts of Canada around the Great Lakes, that's where the stage for the martyrdom of the French Jesuits took place. So they were trying to convert not just the Mohawks, which were the fiercest of the Iroquois tribes, and of course they met their deaths that way. Of course, also we remember Kateri Tekakwitha. Kateri Tekakwitha is the first Native American saint, the first Native American canonized saint. She died at a young age, but she was in a sense a princess. She was at least the daughter of a chief. But the other women drove her out when they realized that she really loved the Lord and was going to live her baptism and share the riches of Christ with others. She was driven out, and she suffered death ultimately at an early age in a convent in Canada. But we honor her too, and our pilgrimage will visit her shrine, which is only a few miles away from Auriesville. So I mentioned all of these things because there's a rich tradition here. We shouldn't forget it, because after all, the Lord requires courage of us too. We have not yet suffered bodily death for Jesus, but if you're a follower of Christ, you're going to be involved in circumstance where people resent what you're doing, people are opposing you, people are ridiculing you, just as they did Jesus. Okay, we have to have that stomach for it, and God, the Lord will give it. As the Lord said, in this world you will have trouble, but take courage, I have overcome the world. Christ's resurrection has overcome all evil. Let's wait now and see how our pilgrimage goes. I'll give you a full report next week after it's happened. God bless you and have a nice day.